Michigan versus UConn. It's Dusty versus Danny. The title game is here, and it's time to crown the 2026 national champion.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Happy National Championship Monday. Welcome to the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. He's Andy Patton. I'm Isaac Schade. And boy, we're here to get you ready for the final game of the 2026 NCAA season. Coming up on the show at the end, we're going to look at some X factors, predictions for the games, kind of some narrative storylines. Before that, though, we'll talk about key matchups, both on the floor and on the sideline, with a dynamic coaching matchup of two guys whose names start with a D and end with a Y. But Andy, first, before we get to all that, we got to start with how we've got to this point and two key potential injuries for tonight's matchup. So Andy, it's the number 1 seed Michigan out of the Midwest region against number 2 UConn out of the East region, 8:50 Eastern on TBS and True TV and HBO Max and probably Tubi and your grandmother's channel 4 that's a bit fuzzy when you do the rabbit ears. FanDuel, Andy, the line started at Michigan -6.5. It has since moved, at least as we record, it is sitting at 7.5. So Mr. Patton, for those who might be just checking in for the national championship, how did we get to this point with Michigan and UConn?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't think anybody would have really, there wasn't a lot of people picking this matchup as your national championship. But at the same time, it's not like it's shocking either. Both these teams were highly regarded coming into the season. Both these teams played extremely well throughout the regular season. They were both UConn ended up being a 2 seed, but they were very much in the conversation for number 1 seed for the vast majority of the season. And Michigan, by mid-November or so, had taken over as the number 1 team in the country and pretty much held on to that all season long. Arizona and them kind of bounced up and down a little bit. Duke was in the mix, but pretty reasonable to say that Michigan and UConn were 2 of the best 3 or 4, at worst 5 best teams in the country for the vast majority of the season. And Michigan in particular, they were just an absolute wrecking ball all season long. They had a few little dips in conference play, especially the back half of conference play where they were playing teams a second time, which I think in some ways teams were a little bit more used to what they were doing and their size and everything, and were able to kind of counteract that a little bit. But they rolled through the Players Era Festival in a truly dominant fashion with a 40-point win over San Diego State, 30-point win over Auburn, 40-point win over Gonzaga. They played extremely well in conference play again, and kind of up until the end when they had a few little skirmishes. And then they got in the NCAA tournament and have been, they've averaged their average margin of victories over 21 in this tournament. At this point, they've scored 90 or more points in every single NCAA tournament game. They've won by as 13 or more in every single one of those games. They have not even been remotely challenged really throughout this tournament. And that includes a win over a very good Tennessee team and an even better Arizona team in the Final Four on Saturday. And for UConn, they're just inevitable. If they get past the Sweet 16, they are here every single time. This team has not lost a game in the Sweet 16 or later in over 15 years. They've won their last 19 and are looking for win number 20, which would be title number 5 in that period of time, dating back to 2011. That hasn't all been Danny Hurley, but certainly recently it has been a lot of Danny Hurley and the Huskies team. Alex Karaban is a senior on this year's team. He's looking for his third national championship. He won as a freshman, as a sophomore. Last year they were bouncing around at 32. Now they're back looking for another championship. It is an incredible story for Dan Hurley and UConn. They had that remarkable comeback over Duke. It looked like their season was dead in the water. They were down 19 points in the second half to the Blue Devils, came all the way back, won that game on that extraordinary Braylon Mullins shot to get them into the Final Four, took care of business against a very big and talented Illinois team. And now they're here. And it feels like we're on a collision course. We were on a collision course a little bit with the old guard in terms of UConn and the success they've had recently, a little bit of a newer guard with Dusty May and Michigan. Neither of these coaches are particularly old, but Danny's been here before. Dusty was in the Final Four at Florida Atlantic, now here with a really big, really strong, really physical team. It's going to be really fun to see how this game plays out.
And Andy, as we look back a little bit to the preseason, both these teams were right there in the mix. The preseason AP Top 25 poll, UConn was 4th, Michigan was 7th. I looked back, Andy, at while you were talking right there, I looked back at our way too early Locked On College Basketball Top 25 from April 14th of last year. So right after the championship game, we had UConn 5th and Michigan 6th. So Andy, really cool that kind of hell, we're not too dumb at this. I think maybe, we got a future here. No, I think that just goes to show that these teams are really special. And Andy, what I kind of love and we've seen is this kind of get old and stay old, right? Like, it's a upperclassmen laden national championship game where we have 3 total freshmen in the main rotation in Braylon Mullins at UConn, Eric Ryba a little further down in the rotation, but then obviously Trey McKinney from Michigan. But Andy, neither team has a freshman in the top 3 in scoring, rebounding, assisting, or blocks. And I just think it shows how tough it is to climb the mountain to get here and how you have to have great coaching and great, not just talent, but experienced talent, Andy. And that shines through again this year.
Yeah, again, I think that people are a little bit too quick to ascribe blame to like the freshmen for Duke as the reason they blew a 19-point lead. Like that was part of it, but certainly that last play, I mean, the people who touched the ball on that final play that Duke tossed the ball away were Cameron and Caden Boozer and Dame Sarr. They were all freshmen. And so I do think that played a role in UConn kind of being able to take the punches from Duke and to start to make that comeback. And again, like Illinois started to make that comeback against UConn in the Final Four, but UConn withstood the punches that they were getting from Illinois and still found a way to win. Duke was unable to do that. And I do think to some extent, that comes with the territory of having a super freshman laden team. And on the flip side of that, you and I thought that Arizona and Michigan were very, very even, that there was like very little difference between the two teams in terms of coaching, in terms of size and physicality and play style and various other things. But there was one pretty big difference, and that is the fact that Arizona's best players and leading scorers were, for the most part, freshmen, and Koa Pete and Braden Burries and Ivan Karchenkov and Dwayne Aristode coming off the bench. And Michigan's are not. Like Trey McKinney was really good in that game, but they could have won that game without him, and Arizona needed their freshmen, and on a big stage they didn't really deliver. They got punched in the mouth and weren't able to find a way to kind of counterpunch and get back into that game, and just kind of wilted down the stretch. And so I do think that it's hard to not look at those two results in particular, not just them. There's obviously others. Arkansas falls early with a pretty freshman laden group. Like it happened a few other times, but those two games in particular, I think, really point to why UConn and Michigan are here specifically, and why some of the teams that are pretty freshman heavy are not.
And Andy, it's funny, on the flip side of that UConn Duke game, it was Braylon Mullins, a freshman, who hit the game-winning shot.
True.
But it was the wisdom of the senior Alex Caravan who gave up his own shot to get a better look for Mullins. So really kind of interesting there. Just very quickly, Andy, for those who might not have much familiarity with these teams, leading scorers for UConn, it's Tarris Reed, a big man. For Michigan, it's Yaxel Lendeborg, a big man, the Big Ten Player of the Year. We'll talk more about him in just a second because for UConn, leading rebounder is also Tarris Reed. For Michigan, it's Merez Johnson, who starts at as their small forward, but he'd be a 4 or 5 for just about anybody else in the nation. Their entire front court, all 3 of them, average 6.8 boards or more. Leading assist man for each team is averaging 5.9 assists or more on the season, Andy, which speaks to how they shared the ball so well on Saturday night in the national semifinals. For UConn, it's Silas Demary, 6 assists a game to lead the Big East. And obviously for Michigan, it's Elliot Cadeau at 5.9. Now, Andy, we mentioned it, and here's a massive storyline coming into tonight's game that developed, some of it on Saturday night, some of it not till Easter morning on Sunday. But both teams have a key injury to a starter at varying levels of uncertainty of how this is going to go. Andy, would you update us on where we're at?
Yeah, so the Michigan one, certainly if you were watching that game, the storyline here was very obvious because Yaxel Lendeborg went out after stepping on the foot of Mo Krivas on a drive to the basket. He exited the game. It looked like it was a rolled ankle, but then he was out in the locker room for a while, ended up coming back out, didn't play the rest of the first half, but was dealing with what they ended up reporting as an MCL sprain, so a knee sprain, effectively. He wore a brace. He came out. He started the second half, but Dusty May said he looked like he was an old man playing at the YMCA, and he did. Like he was not moving well at all. The brace, I mean, it was surprising to me that he was on the floor, and he did well. I don't want to say that like, oh, he wasn't moving well, which means he played bad. No, he had a couple of back-breaking threes early in the second half of this game. Like he played well, but He came out again, came back in at the 7-minute mark, which seemed very surprising to me because Michigan had that game in the bag and did not need to further risk injury to him. But the latest update, as we're recording this right now in the early afternoon on Sunday, is that the imaging came back clean. He's expecting to be cleared to play. How well he's moving, I think, will be kind of TBD. It certainly depends how his knee feels when he wakes up on Monday morning. But at this point, there's not a lot of indication. It seems very unlikely that he will not play in this game. Like, he's going to play. I just don't know how healthy he will be. On the solo ball side of things, this came out on Sunday morning and was a bit more of a surprise. It turns out that solo ball had a sprained foot that he suffered early in that UConn game against Illinois. He played 16 more minutes, by the way, on that sprained foot. And so it seemed like he was doing fine, but now he's in a walking boot, and he said he's leaving it up to the medical staff of whether he's going to play. Dan Hurley said he didn't practice, and that they weren't sure they were going to be able to get an MRI because it was Easter Sunday. So they're looking at trying to get an MRI for him. They are not sure if he's not practicing, and they're really, really not sure if he's going to play. Like, this feels truly up in the air. And just reading the tea leaves on this, it feels to me like it is leaning a little bit more in the direction of him not playing than him playing, but they're going to do everything they can to get him onto the floor. But like Yaxel, the best case scenario is still a pretty hampered solo ball in this championship game.
Yeah. And Andy, obviously Michigan already without LJ Kaysen, critical in there. He's off the bench, or, was when he was playing, but a critical part of that backcourt rotation. Obviously for UConn, they don't have other players that are out, but both Silas, Demary, and Jalen Stewart are working their way back from injury. So Andy, I know we need to move on, but I think an important question for us to answer here quickly is, which team do we think is more prepared to handle either the absence of or a seriously limited version of Lendeborg for Michigan or solo ball for UConn? What do you think?
Well, it's funny. Lendeborg is a better player, but I think Michigan is more equipped to handle him not playing. I mean, we saw them still dominate Arizona without Yaxel for most of the first half and for a lot of the second half as well. Roddy Gale will step into a bigger role. They have Demary Burnett who can play. Like, they have Will Shedder. Like, they have a lot of depth on this roster, even without Kaysen, even if Lendeborg is limited or unable to go. Whereas UConn, I'm more worried about what they would do without solo ball. I think they'd slide Braylon Mullins down to the 2. I think they would probably start Jalen Stewart at the 3. And I think that works. I think that's a solid team for them still. It's either Stewart or Jayden Ross. Either way, I think it works for UConn, but the depth becomes a lot thinner, and they really rely on solo balls and off-ball guard creator. And I think it hurts them more. Even though Lendeborg's a better player, I think UConn gets more hurt without having solo ball.
Andy, I truly have nothing more to add, because how you laid that out is exactly what I was going to say. I agree. I think that UConn is the team that would be more damaged by this. And I think part of that too is the uncertainty of, yes, Demary is getting back and looking healthier, but you still just don't fully know with him. And so I'm with you on that.
Well, we're going to talk about some of the key matchups in this game, which obviously will be impacted by these injuries. So we'll talk more about that. We'll also talk about how the centers are going to line up between Aday and Tarris Reed, fun point guard battle between Demary and Cadeau. That, other key matchups, including on the sideline between these two coaches, coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, Wayday is here. And if you've been thinking about upgrading your space, this is the time to do it. We're talking about some of the best deals of the year on furniture, decor, outdoor essentials, everything that you need to refresh your space. During Wayday, Wayfair is offering up to 80% off with fast and free shipping on everything, making it easy to find pieces that fit your style and your budget. It's super easy to filter by size, style, and price, so you're not wasting all of your time scrolling. The reviews and photos help you feel confident in what you're getting. Plus, Wayfair verified products are vetted by specialists, so you know you're getting top quality. Whether it's upgrading a room, adding an outdoor piece, or just finding something that ties your space together, it makes the whole process simple from start to finish. Wayday is the sale to shop the best deals in home. We're talking up to 80% off with fast and free shipping on everything. So head to wayfair.com on April 25th through the 27th to shop Wayday. That's wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. All right, folks, I want to thank all of you for making Locked On College Basketball your first listen or watch of the day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if you've been thinking about joining the Everyday Club, now is the time. You get ad-free versions of the show. You also get one-on-one text messaging with the both of us. And right now, you can still use promo code MARCH to get your first month free. Head to lockedoncollegebasketball.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. Isaac, continuing our conversation here, obviously talking about this national championship matchup, number 2 UConn versus number 1 Michigan. Man, oh man, cannot wait for this battle. We already talked about kind of how these two teams got here. Michigan bulldozing their way into the national championship. UConn doing what seems at this point inevitable for Danny Hurley and the Huskies, but both teams dealing with these injuries to Lendeborg and Solo Ball. We'll see how hampered those two players are coming into this game on Monday night. But want to kind of take a look at some of the key matchups, like from a player personnel perspective, the front courts, the back courts, the depth, bench depth, all of that stuff. And I'm going to kind of toss it to you on where you want to start when looking at how these two teams are going to line up on Monday night.
Andy, I want to start with the head of the snake. We talked about both of these teams have point guards averaging 5.9 assists per more. We discussed over the weekend how in the Arizona game, Elliot Cadeau had a poor shooting night, but really did a nice job as a floor leader in other ways in terms of steals, in terms of assists. I think it was 10 assists, but did have 6 turnovers, but I think had 4 steals as well. And so there was kind of just kind of, I guess, part of the Elliot Cadeau experience, as we've talked about. Silas Demary brings a different level of size and capability that not that Jaden Bradley is small, but Bradley had those foul troubles. And I'm very curious to see how, because with Demary, I think you look at it and you're like, wow, he had 7 points and 9 rebounds and 7 assists and just 1 turnover on Saturday night. But one of the things that Danny Hurley often talks about with Demary is just what a pest and a nuisance and a defensive stalwart he is. And so I think perhaps more important than anything he does offensively is maybe allow Cadeau to get some shots until he heats up, maybe, or something like that. But stopping Cadeau's playmaking capabilities. And so I'm watching this matchup, but specifically the ways in which Silas Demary works to slow down Elliot Cadeau playmaker.
What stands out to me is while Yaxel Lendeborg and Solo Ball could not be more different in terms of the roles that they play on their respective teams. Lendeborg's a 6'9", kind of 3-4 hybrid. Solo Ball's a 6'3" combo guard hybrid. I think that their respective injuries really impact the small forward position, which right now looks on paper to be a matchup between freshman Braylon Mullins and Morez Johnson Jr. And those two players Mullins is basically a 2 guard. Like he's a big guard, but he is a guard. He is a sharpshooter. He is he's an outside shooter. He does not play a forward type position really at all. And Morez Johnson is, like you said, he'd be a starting 5 for probably 150 teams in college basketball. And for everybody else, he'd be a 4. It's incredibly unique that he plays the 3 on this team. He's their leader in rebounds, averages 7 rebounds per game. He's a really good touch around the rim and a really, really good defensive player. The matchup between Mullins and Johnson feels odd. Like they're such different players and they don't feel like they play the same position. But if Lendeborg is out, I don't think he's gonna be out, but if he's limited, Johnson slides up to the 4. You probably slide in Roddy Gale at that spot. And if Solo Ball is out, I think you slide Mullins down and you slide Jayden Ross in. And if the small forward position ends up becoming a lot more of Jayden Ross versus Roddy Gale, that kind of feels more like a typical small forward. Gale's small for a 3, but like that still feels more kind of normal, I guess, for lack of a better word. So I'm very interested how that position group dukes it out. I'm curious if Hurley will have Mullins guarding Morez Johnson, because it doesn't feel like a great matchup, but I don't know who else it is.
What else are you going to do?
You put Caravan on him, then you're putting Mullins on Lendeborg. No, that doesn't work. So again, I think this is, and we'll get into X factors and stuff a little bit later, but this is where some of those bigger wings on UConn's bench are going to be significant and important, because you have to be able to counter Michigan's size. And if Lendeborg is able to play, they're going to play 3 big players, huge minutes in this game. And I don't think UConn's current lineup is really constructed for that, which I'm not saying Solo Ball being hurt would be like a blessing in disguise. He's way too important for this UConn team. But if you don't get to play ball much or at all, you're going to have a bigger lineup on the floor. And that may not necessarily be a bad thing.
Andy, per the listed weight, I'd like you to just take a guess, unless you have already looked and know it. how many pounds Braylon Mullins is giving up to Marez Johnson?
God, it's got to be 45.
No, that's low.
It's more than that. I thought that was a generous, like 65.
It's not that much per like their listed weight. It's 54 pounds.
Jeez.
I mean, like, and so there you go. And to your point, like if they do have to move things around and you've got like say Mullins on Lendeborg doesn't weigh as much as Johnson, but he's still got like 45 pounds on him.
Yeah.
And so there's a thing like, Yaxel might be banged up, but it's like, hey, I'll tell you what, I'm going to just take Braylon Mullins in the post and I can use that YMCA game that you were just talking about earlier that Dusty May had talked about. And I'm just going to back him down. And guess what? If they bring a double, I welcome that. Bring it on. I would love to see it because, Yaxel is plenty capable of throwing assists, averaging 3.3 a game, second on the team behind Cadeau. And so it's just going to be really interesting. I love that you identified this matchup at the 3 and all the variables because of the injuries and all that. So, man, that's going to be really intriguing to watch here. But also, Andy, Dan Hurley is not going to just sit idly by and say, well, okay, I guess we're screwed here. So if you're UConn, you also got to think about, okay, so then how do we attack a gimpy Yaxel? Because if he's going to play and if they're insistent on him playing, then great. There's perhaps our advantage, Andy. And so, on one end, Mullins is going to be giving up all this size, but on the other end, he can attack and go after Yaxel, right? And try to get around him, draw foul trouble, try to get Mara to have to help off, and then he can just dump off the Tarris Reed for or whatever, or skip pass out for a Demary 3 or something of that nature. And so I love that you've identified it, and it was so well laid out. But I think that the chess back and forth on both sides of the court are going to be really interesting here.
Yeah, agreed. I think whoever is guarding Mullins, whether it's if they put Lendeborg on Mullins, you just try to take him off the dribble and make him move laterally. If they have Lendeborg on Caravan, maybe you set some screens, you do some switches, you do whatever you can to try to get. I mean, Caravan could try to take him off the dribble too, but if you have Mullins or somebody like that, you just go, you attack at him. And Lendeborg's got enough size and strength that I'm not saying it'll work every single time, but wear him out, like make him have to do that. And if he stops you a few times, fine. There's going to be a lot of stops in this game. But if you're tiring him out, if you're making him move on a knee that is, a little bit precarious, like that could be an advantage that UConn has. And then I think the last matchup, which I know we got, a couple other things we want to talk about here, but we can't ignore the Tarris Reed Aday matchup here either. I mean, so much of the conversation coming into the UConn-Illinois game was about, can Tarris Reed score on this front court with Ivasic and all these other bigs for Illinois? And he did. I mean, it wasn't his most effective game, but he still had 17 points. He still had 11 rebounds. He was 6 of 12 from the field. But Michigan is a different animal. I mean, Aday has been unbelievable in this tournament, not just offensively, but as a shot blocker, as a rim protector. And how many times did we see Arizona just have 3 or 4 bodies around them and not able to score at the rim? Cole Pete couldn't get anything going. Mo Krivas couldn't get anything going. Karchenkov struggled offensively because there was just trees around them all game long. If Tarris Reed cannot have a productive game at the level that we're used to seeing from Tarris Reed, who is playing against his former team, I think that's a really, really hard path for a win for UConn if he's not able to do what he normally does.
Yeah, and Andy, it's not like you think back to that first UConn national championship team. You had a little bit of an undersized Adama Sanogo, but coming off the bench to back him up was Donovan Clingan, who then turned into the dude the next season as part of the dominant 2024 run. The guy coming off the bench to back up Tarris Reed here is Eric Ryba, who all due respect to Ryba, I think he's going to be a great player eventually. He is not at that level that like a Clingan was at that season. And so, Andy, I think that's part of the issue here for UConn. If Reed can't do what he needs to do, can that Michigan size just essentially and ultimately overwhelm anything they're doing? Now, Andy, both these teams do use a lot of depth. UConn and Michigan throughout the season had gone 9 deep. Michigan has now kind of turned to 8 deep with the Kaysen injury. And so going to be interesting to see coming off the bench who is key. And we'll talk X factors in the next segment. But Andy, I think where we need to get to is there's these X factors. There's some storylines. We got to get to predictions. But one of the other things, one of the other matchups we got to look at is Dusty versus Danny. Both of these head coaches have Final Four experience. Which team has the coaching eggs? We're going to check that box coming up in just a second. This episode is brought to you by TurboTax. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is, well, quite frankly, a lot. You're trying to book an appointment. Well, that's not the most convenient thing. Maybe you're sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers and it's like, couldn't I digitize this? Or maybe you're emailing back and forth wondering, do you even understand my situation with taxes? This year, though, you're getting a major upgrade. We don't have to worry about those things because Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with the real tax expert and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, boom, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's that relief of walking in and meeting a real person and then walking out knowing your taxes are being handled correctly. I don't know about you, but the stress relief of that is insane to me. So head to TurboTax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment today. Check it out, TurboTax. Andy, we've talked about the matchups on the floor. We're going to talk about matchups of guys who hopefully won't be on the floor if they don't want to get a technical foul. And that's Dusty and Danny, Dusty May and Dan Hurley. Andy, interestingly enough, it's the two coaches that were in the Final Four with Final Four experience who are the ones that are moving on. Danny Hurley in his third national championship game, his third Final Four with UConn. Dusty May in his second Final Four, now first national championship game, but first of either with Michigan, where he had previously taken FAU to the national semifinals, lost on a buzzer beater to San Diego State, who then ended up losing to these very UConn Huskies, Andy. So very interesting storylines there. As you look at it, Mr. AP Patton, I don't know, that was like MLB baseball or ATM machine.
Pin number.
Yeah, pin number. Anyway, if you know, you know. Andy, which team has the advantage on the sideline?
I think it's UConn. And I think Dusty May's a great coach. They're obviously both great coaches, but I think the experience of having been here multiple times, obviously it does help that Dusty May has been to a Final Four, but he is now here with a bigger program. He is here in a different situation, and he is in his first national championship. Like, that does matter too, that Danny has not only been to a Final Four, he has been to the championship. And again, like you and I talked about this coming into that game against Illinois, like how much is Hurley's experience compared to Brad Underwood, who had not been to a Final Four? Like how much is that going to matter? And I think we saw that it did. It played out in a way where Illinois, you know, they got down and UConn just kind of kept them at bay, and they did make their run and they did make their comeback, and we kind of knew that they would, but UConn did not panic. They did not start to wilt under that pressure. They just kept doing what they needed to do. They hit big shots down the stretch and kept Illinois from getting all the way back into this game and taking a lead, something, again, Duke was unable to do in that first game before that. So I think that this is going to be a relevant thing. I think it's relevant that Michigan hasn't faced as much adversity. And I know that that's it's kind of a difficult, I don't know how to actually reckon with that, because on one hand, dominating your opponents every single time is clearly not a bad thing, but it does make you wonder, how does this team handle the first time they face adversity in this tournament? And again, I don't think this is exactly what happened, but Arizona had not faced any adversity. They had that first half against Purdue. I should clarify, they did, but then they came back and dominated the second half of that game. And in this game, Arizona got down and got down and got down and couldn't really figure out how to fight back into it and never was really able to do so. I think that says more about Michigan than it does about Arizona, but it does make me wonder what Michigan looks like if UConn is able to kind of get a 10, 12-point lead. Can they just kind of hold them off? Or is this Michigan team going to be able to find a way to fight back into it? Again, they're not young like Arizona. They're not inexperienced in even these kind of situations. Not a lot of Final Four experience on this roster, but a lot of veteran guys who've been around, who've been to the tournament, a coach who's been in the Final Four. Like, I don't think that Michigan's at a big disadvantage, but UConn does have the advantage from a coaching and an experience perspective.
Yeah, Andy, I truly think both of these coaches are elite coaches in our sport. I know Dusty May is a little bit earlier into it than Coach Hurley is, and I think that's the only separator I can truly find. It's funny because Dusty more of the good guy that good Midwestern boy, and Danny more of the headbutt stuff.
Yeah.
And that's fine. They both do it in different ways, but I think they're both wildly successful and are going to continue to be wildly successful. But Andy, because of that, the only main separator that there seems to be is the experience that Dan Hurley has already had here. And so I would agree. I'm going to put the check mark for the coaching edge in UConn's favor. Andy, as we look at other X factors, let's each pick one for this game. Who, Mr. Patton, would you like to talk about?
Yeah, I've kind of touched on this a little bit throughout the show already, but it's Jayden Ross for UConn. He's 6'7" wing who comes off the bench for them, plays about 17 and a half minutes per game. So he's a productive key part of the rotation on a regular basis. He would, in my mind, he would be the player who steps into the starting role should Solo Ball be unable to go. Like, I think he starts at the 3. I think you slide Mullins down to the 2. So you go Demary, Mullins, Ross, and then you go with your front court of Caravan and Reed. And he's a good defensive player. I think he's going to be relevant in this game, regardless of Solo Ball's health. He's going to be relevant defensively against potentially Yaxel Lendeborg or Morez Johnson. He'll probably line up against both of them at some point again, depending on Lendeborg's health. He's also a very efficient offensive player, shot 64% on 2-pointers, 39.5% from 3. It was a relatively low volume, but not a tiny volume either. Like he shoots a couple of 3s a game and he makes them about 40% of the time. Like, he is a prototypical 3-and-D wing. And against this Michigan team, I think both those skills matter a ton. And when you factor in Solo Ball's health, and when you factor in the fact that Ross has been here before, he won a championship as a freshman at UConn. There's not a ton of guys on this roster who were there long enough to have won at least one of those titles. Obviously, Caravan is here, but so is Ross. So he's won a championship. He fills a role that's important in this matchup. There's the potential for Solo Ball to be out and for him to play a bigger role. Like, all of that, to me, kind of points to Ross being a really critical part of this game plan frankly, for both teams.
Yeah, and that makes a ton of sense to me. I'm very curious to see how it plays out with that. I think like the anticipation of it is really curious to me. Mr. Patton, for my X Factor, I'm going to go with the guy that I had for my X Factor for Michigan in their national semifinal game, and that's Trey McKinney. While these teams are upperclassmen dominated, what you need to be a national title contender is what both these teams have, in my opinion. A team that is led and dominated by upperclassmen, but has at least one, if not two, high-level freshmen, potential NBA-type freshmen that are part of the rotation. And that is who Trey McKinney is for this Michigan team. Andy, versus Arizona on Saturday night, he was their second leading scorer with 16 points, 6 of 9 shooting, 4 of 6 from 3. He is their leading three-point shooter by percentage, at least for active players. LJ Kaysen was, and now it's McKinney. He's tied with Yaxel Lendeborg for the most made threes on this team. He can get out and run. He can do other things. And Andy, while all the focus is on so many of these other dudes, it is this freshman Trey McKinney that stepped up and was the second leading scorer, again, behind Aday on Saturday night. And we've seen in other national championship games when a freshman off the bench can come in and be a dominating factor. There's a specific one I remember, Andy. I want to see if you're reading my mind. It's about a decade ago now that this happened, but a non-starter for a national championship team was the leading scorer. He's now an NBA player. Any idea who I'm talking about?
Is it DiVincenzo from Villanova?
Yes, in 2017, my man, or 2018. 31 points for Dante off the bench in that game to be the leading scorer in that game. And crazy stuff. Am I expecting that from McKinney? No. But if Yaxel continues to be banged up, if we got these other things, McKinney could step up and yet again play a critical role for these Wolverines in this game on Monday evening, Andy.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. McKinney, to me, I almost picked Mullins as my X factor for a lot of the reasons I picked Ross, of like his role might change because of the ball injury, but I didn't want us to both go with the freshman, but I do think it's notable that again, with respect to Eric Riba, like these are the two freshmen that are going to impact this game the most by a pretty considerable amount. Obviously there's a chance that, Reed gets in foul trouble and Riba plays big minutes. And that might not be good for UConn in that way. But McKinney and Mullins are very, very good players, and I'm really interested to see what their role ends up looking like. And McKinney, obviously, as a player who's capable of being the leading scorer for this team, is certainly relevant with him coming off the bench.
All right, Andy, there's several storylines we're watching. I'm just going to rattle through a couple of them, and we'll see kind of where that takes us. One of the big storylines is Michigan's offense, which has scored 90 points or more in all 5 NCAA tournament games so far, the only team to ever do that. Andy, as I looked kind of inside of the numbers of both of these teams and the points they've allowed this season, I'm going to set Michigan's kind of magical number here at 75. The Wolverines have scored 75 or more in all but 8 games this season, while UConn has held all but 5 opponents to 75 or less. So I think 75 is the magic number, but I'm very curious to see if Michigan can get to 90. Again, UConn has only allowed 2 teams to score 90 or more, and one of those was in overtime. So, Andy, I just don't see this happening, but hey, we saw what happened with Michigan and Arizona, and so it wouldn't shock me in any way.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I'd be surprised if Michigan gets to 90 against UConn, but again, like on one level, I feel it feels wrong to assume Michigan can't do that because of what they've done this year. On the other hand, betting against UConn has felt weird at this point too, because they just seem inevitable. That's what makes this matchup so darn exciting. I don't know which side is going to win on Monday night, especially with both these teams dealing with injuries. It's going to be an interesting one.
Yeah. All right, Andy, sticking on the Michigan side of things, there's 2 that stand out to me on the Michigan side and 2 more things on the UConn side. For Michigan, obviously, if they win, it ends the Big Ten national title drought, which goes back to 2000 and Michigan State. Also, Michigan, their only their only NCAA tournament championship is in 1989. Should they win on Monday night, they will become the 16th school to have multiple national championships. So that's interesting to watch both of those. On the UConn side of things, Andy, if UConn wins, it will be their 3rd championship in the last 4 seasons. That hasn't happened since UCLA won 3 and 4 seasons from 1972 to 1975. That's on the back end of their crazy run when they won 10 championships in a 12-year span from 1964 to 76. And that included a streak of 7 straight national championships for John Wooden from 67 to 63. Also, Andy, if UConn wins, it will be their 7th ever NCAA tournament championship, all of which will have come from 1999 through the present. It would break their tie with North Carolina for sole possession of 3rd most NCAA tournament titles ever, behind only UCLA 11 and Kentucky with 8. North Carolina claims another one, but Andy, it was not a NCAA tournament championship. That's why I continue to use it that specifically. And so for all those who want to get like, oh, UConn's not a blue blood, hear me say, they already have more championships than Duke and Indiana and Kansas. If they win this one, will break a tie with North Carolina and literally only trail UCLA and Kentucky. Oh my word, Andy, this Huskies program over the last quarter century has been insane.
Unreal. It's unreal. I mean, the fact that in the modern era of the NCAA tournament, which is generally considered 1985, we have never, ever seen a team win 3 out of 4, ever. The Mike Krzyzewski Duke teams did not do that. Kansas, Kentucky did not do that. Like, we have not seen this level of dominance. And again, they may not. I'm not saying they're going to win, although I'm going to give my pick here momentarily. But even if they don't, to have been in a position where they might do that is truly unbelievable. And obviously the Big Ten title drought has been so oft discussed. The fact that the last time a Big Ten team got to the national championship game was Purdue, and they lost to this UConn team a few years ago. UConn could spoil the party for the Big Ten yet again, which is another kind of fun wrinkle in that Big Ten storyline. And shout out Glenn Rice, because he was the dude on that Michigan team in 1989. I just feel like we need to mention Glenn Rice whenever we can. So here we are.
Hey, speaking of former, did you see? I wish I had realized this before the game, that the Fab Five did like an alt cast where literally all 5 of them were like commentating the game.
And I totally missed this.
Yeah, it was with Lethco that's on the desk a lot for CBS. Like
Yeah.
he was kind of the not narrator, the whatever. MC, yeah, we'll go with that. So it was him in the Fab Five, literally all 5 of them, Andy. I hope
Amazing.
I can go back and find that, because what a fun ride that must be for this thing. So Andy, all sorts of fun storylines. Also, I want to put out again the one that you caught, that this will, regardless of who wins, it will be 18 times in the last 19 championships that either a 1 seed or a UConn has won the championship, save that Villanova team in 2016, not that DiVincenzo team in 18, number 2 seed Villanova. I don't really remember who they beat in that championship or how it went down, but I'm sure it was completely uneventful, Andy.
You have an amnesia about that game?
Selective amnesia, indeed. No, shouts to Chris Jenkins with the greatest shot in the history of the NCAA tournament, bar none. Andy, game predictions. We said it earlier. FanDuel has this game as we record, Michigan minus 7.5. Who's going to win, and will they cover?
I'm going to give you my prediction, but I didn't get a chance to say it because I needed to look it up to make sure I was true. Speaking of the Fab Five, Juwan Howard was Tarris Reed's coach for 2 years, and that's just a funny thing in the sense that he's pretty likely rooting for Michigan, but his player that he coached for 2 years is the best player on the team opposing Michigan. That's all. Just a fun fact.
That's a great catch. Yes.
Yeah, that's a fun fact. I'm going to go with UConn to win this game. I think the Big Ten streak, the streak, as in losing streak, continues. Even though Michigan, I get why they're favored. I get why they're favored by 7.5. The solo ball of it all is a significant factor. But UConn is just, it seems inevitable at this point, and I think that they're going to find a way. I think we're going to see big games from Demary. We're going to see Caravan's experience play through. Tarris Reed has found ways to be successful. He's going to be super motivated against his old team. I'm going to go with UConn. I'm going to go with it being a close game, but I'm going to have them to obviously cover because they're dogs in this one. 81-75 is what I'll say is the final score here in favor of the Huskies. Danny Hurley gets 3 out of 4.
Andy, you and I so often completely agree on almost all of our takes. And we in fact, last night we were texting about how we're essentially an old married couple in some ways.
Same brain.
That's why I love it the few times when we do disagree, because then we can poke fun with each other and it's a blast. Because I have been lower on Michigan preseason coming into the tournament. And so I'm going to make up for that by just saying, like that 24 UConn team that was just so dominant, and it was like, why second guess what you're staring at in the face? That's where I'm at here. I want to come around to it before it's too late. This Michigan team has blitzed through everyone, including who I think was the better team, Arizona, and blitzed the ever-living whatever out of them, Andy, on Saturday night. The Lendeborg thing does give me some pause, but I'm just going to ride with what I'm seeing in front of me. Michigan by 9, 90-81. So yes, they do. I don't care what the UConn numbers on the season are saying. It's just Michigan 90-81 to win and cover. Andy, obviously we will be live Monday night after this game to unpack it all, to kind of set sail into the offseason, which is going to be very sad. But as we set sail on this season, we also open up the transfer portal at the exact same time when the clock hits midnight. And man, the flurry of activity is going to be absolutely insane.
I cannot wait. I'm sad. It's bittersweet every time we get to the end of the season, but this is going to be a fantastic cap to the year on Monday night between these two teams. Like Isaac said, we will be live after that game, so check it out. Find the show on YouTube. The audio version will, of course, be published shortly after as well. And then we'll be getting you right into the offseason. We'll talk major storylines. We'll talk legacy for whichever team wins here, and then some major offseason storylines, transfer portal, various other things that are going to start going on very, very soon after that. Until then, though, as always, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. We want to say let's go Wild Popes. Cheers to the Mick Bruins and watching his old buddy Aday Mara on Monday night. And until Monday night after this game, peace out.